Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me those ears. Today, I want to talk about transition zone and then how it applies to customers. So in one of my presentations, I talk about how in one study they showed that department stores leave 10 feet of space in front of the door because they realize that customers, when they walk through the door, need to orient themselves before they decide which way to go. So in other words, when you walk into a large store, let's say a Target or a Walmart, they leave 10 feet of space at least, minimum, so you can orient yourself to decide which way to go. Now, this is important because they call that the transition zone from the outside to the inside. And I often thought about that as really important when it comes to customers. See, oftentimes when we're doing a presentation, we have to create this transition zone for customers. For example, let's say that you're going to meet with a customer, whether they come into a Zoom call or whether they come into your office physically, into a conference room, you have to provide them with a mental transition zone. What is that specifically in this case? This is where you orient or allow the customer to orient themselves in terms of what's going to happen during the presentation. So in many cases, we often jump into a presentation. We exchange pleasantries. How you doing? How's the day? How's the day going? What do you think of the weather? Where do you live? So forth and so on. Little things we do to create that rapport at the beginning, then we jump into the presentation. But the transition zone has to be created. And the transition zone in any presentation should be what we're going to talk about and what are the desired outcomes of the conversation. So for example, if I'm trying to close somebody on a sales training program, I'm going to give them that transition zone by squaring up and framing the following. I'll say something like this. I said, before we jump into the presentation, it's almost like opening the door, right, when you're coming in. Before I jump into the presentation, here's kind of the high-level view of what I'm going to discuss today. 1, we're going to talk about the programs we have. 2, we're going to talk about how they apply to you. And at the end of this conversation, you can decide whether you want to work with me or not. Fair enough, you get the upfront agreement, but that little bit of explanation at the beginning is almost like, 1, a transition zone, but it also sets up a framework for what the discussion is going to be about. Now, to some of you, this may be very basic, but it's amazing how many times I've seen it repeatedly that we don't simply frame the conversation, give the customer that transition zone before we actually jump into the presentation. Try it, let me know what you think, and I think you'll find that your customers, your clients, will be more receptive to your presentation if you just give them that transition. And that is it for the Sales Influence Podcast. Leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Pandora, Spotify, or wherever you find me. Always like to hear your feedback. Also, if you haven't checked out the Sales Velocity Academy, do so at salesvelocityacademy.com. New programs, new structure, new curriculum. You might want to check it out, salesvelocityacademy.com. And that's it for me, Victor Antonio, always reminding you, sell it ain't hard when you know how. Take care, guys. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.